At 75 below zero, the air stops acting like air. It becomes something solid, a heavy curtain that you have to physically push through just to move. Breathe in too fast, and your lungs don't just sting, they reject the intrusion, seizing up as if you've swallowed broken glass. Agafya knew the rules. She didn't fear the malice of the Yakut winter anymore. She was part of it, weathered and eroded like the limestone cliffs along the Indigirka River. Inside the timber walls of her cabin, the silence was absolute, heavier than the snow piling against the single window. But then a sound broke the stillness, a dry, rhythmic rasp. Vaska, the old tomcat, missing half an ear from a fight a decade ago, was licking the bottom of a rusted tin bowl. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It wasn't hunger anymore. It was desperation made audible. Agafya looked at her own hands, knuckles swollen into gnarled knots of arthritis, and gripped the handle of the ice pick. Today the river would yield, or the silence would take them both. The long walk to nowhere.
God, give me strength.
Getting dressed was a ceremony of survival. First came the wool stockings, darned so many times they were more patch than original fabric. Then the felt Valinki boots, stiff as wood. Agafya layered herself in everything she owned. A chaotic armor of sheepskin, mismatched scarves, and a coat that smelled of wood smoke and old grease. Vaska watched her from the top of the stove, his yellow eyes narrowed. He was a scrawny thing now, his ribs pressing against his matted gray fur like the rungs of a ladder. But he held his head up. He knew what the pick meant. "Don't look at me like that, old man," she croaked, her voice rusty from days of disuse. "We go." Pushing the door open required her entire body weight. The cold hit them instantly, a physical blow, a hammer to the face that sucked the moisture right out of her eyes. Vaska didn't hesitate. He leaped into the hood of her coat, burrowing against the back of her neck, a trembling knot of heat. Outside, the world had been erased. There was no horizon, only a gradient of white fading into a bruised gray sky. Every step was a negotiation. The snow was packed hard, screeching like styrofoam under her boots. Agafya dragged the small wooden sled behind her, the iron pick rattled clanking a grim rhythm. 100 yards felt like 10 miles. Her breath plumed before her, freezing instantly on her eyelashes, gluing them together. She had to keep blinking, forcefully to keep her vision clear. Halfway to the riverbank, her hip flared with a hot, jagged pain. She stopped, leaning on the handle of the pick, gasping. Inside her hood, Vaska shifted, pressing a cold nose against her ear, purring a low, rattling vibration. It wasn't comfort, it was a demand. "Keep moving." "I hear you," she whispered into the scarf wrapped around her mouth. "I hear you." Below them, the river lay dormant. It wasn't water anymore. It was a highway of ice 5 feet thick, locking away the life beneath. To anyone else, it looked like a wasteland. To Agafya, it was a vault, and she had forgotten the combination. Striking the concrete. Down on the ice, the wind found no resistance. It swept down the river channel like water through a pipe, stripping the heat from Agafya's layers within minutes. She brushed the snow away from the old fishing hole, now sealed shut by days of neglect. The ice here wasn't white. It was black, deep, and clear, staring back at her like an obsidian mirror. She raised the pick. Her shoulders screamed in protest. Clang. The sound was pathetic, a high-pitched ring that vanished into the vastness, leaving barely a scratch on the surface. The ice in Yakutia at these temperatures doesn't chip. It shatters like quartz, or sometimes it doesn't break at all. It just laughs at you. Vaska hopped out of her hood, landing gingerly on the ice. He lifted one paw, then the other, shaking them against the sting, but he didn't run. He sat by the sealed hole, staring at the spot where the water should be. He looked up at her, let out a silent meow, the air too cold to carry the sound, and waited. "I'm trying," she grunted, swinging again. Clang! A shard flew up, cutting her cheek. She didn't feel it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The rhythm became a trance, lift, drop, shockwave up the arms, repeat. Her breath came in ragged wheezes. The sweat trapped against her skin turned cold, a dangerous layer of clammy frost beneath her clothes. If she stopped now, she would freeze from the inside out. She was 87 years old. She had buried a husband, 2 sons, and a life that used to exist before the world got so quiet. She shouldn't be here. She should be a memory. But the cat watched. He sat huddled in a tight ball of misery, his tail wrapped around his nose, trusting her to do the impossible. Her vision blurred. Black spots danced in the periphery. The pick felt like it weighed a ton. She dropped to her knees, sobbing dry, tearless heaves. "I can't," she whispered. Vaska stood up, walked over to her knee, and headbutted her arm. He bit her heavy sleeve, tugging. Rage flared. Not at the cat, but at the absurdity of dying here now. She grabbed the pick with both hands, using her knees for leverage, and drove it down with a guttural scream that tore her throat. Crack! A spider web of white fractures shot through the black ice. A tiny bubble of air shifted beneath. Blood on the snow water. Dark, slushy water seeped up through the fracture, staining the pristine white snow around the hole. It wasn't a geyser, just a murky soup of ice chips and river sludge. But to Agafya, it was beautiful. Trembling uncontrollably now, the adrenaline crash mixing with hypothermia, she cleared the slush with a ladle. Her hands were clumsy hooks, barely obeying her brain's commands. She baited the simple handline with a piece of rancid fat she'd kept in her pocket, dropping it into the black depth. Now came the hardest part, waiting. Motionlessness is death at minus 75 degrees Celsius. Agafya rocked back and forth, stomping her feet, singing a song from her childhood without making a sound, just mouthing the words to keep her jaw working. Vaska crouched right at the rim of the hole, his whiskers twitching, sensing the thermal shift from the water below. The line jerked, not a nibble, a violent tug. Agafya didn't have the strength for finesse. She hauled the line hand over hand, backing away from the hole, slipping on the ice, falling onto her side, but never letting go. Out of the slush flew a burbot, mottled green and yellow, twisting furiously, slapping wetly against the ice. It froze almost instantly upon hitting the air, stiffening in mid-thrash. Vaska didn't wait for permission. He was on it, a blur of gray fur. He bit into the fish, growling low in his throat, possessive and primal. Agafya lay on her back, staring up at the slate sky, her chest heaving. She watched the cat tear at the fish, blood vivid red against the snow. A profound exhaustion washed over her, heavier than the sleep she craved, but looking at the animal eat, she felt a spark of warmth in her gut that had nothing to do with temperature. She sat up, groaning, and reached out. Vaska paused, ears back, then relaxed, allowing her to stroke his spine. "Eat," she whispered, her hand resting on his heaving flank. "We live today." She cracked the frozen fish in half against the ice. One share for the sled, one share for the cat's belly. The walk back would be hell, but the sled would be heavier, and that was a good burden to bear. Agafya stood up, the wind howling around her, and turned her face toward the faint outline of the cabin.